Hassan, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay,
Can you
did I
hear
say your
me?
name right? Yes, I can hear you perfectly. Did I say your name right?
ASIN, yeah. Like if I
Asen.
didn't have a
Okay.
J or an M, yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay. This is the very first time that I am working with Zoom. It seems like, I don't know, from my perspective, it seems like every 3 months the school decides to change who they're going to work with and what they're going to do, which I don't know. And then everybody acts surprised that I'm so confused.
Yeah.
So I'm very used to um, Teams meetings. That's that has been a really good go-to type of process, and the school isn't using that anymore. So I'm going to try. I see Zach and Scotty are here too. We are recording, and I don't know where the recording is recorded to, but I guess we'll find that out. So I'm glad you guys are here. Zach and Scotty, can both of you hear me as well? Okay. Scotty says yes. How about Zach? All right. I do not know what to do. If Zach cannot hear, I don't know what to do. Oh, Zach. Okay. You can hear. Okay, great. We are going to give it just a couple minutes and then we're going to go ahead and get started, or just a minute or so. Let's see. All right. Everything looks good. Okay. All right. I really appreciate you guys showing up for tonight. How did you find the link to this meeting? It should be something that is the fourth or fifth toggle down in your Canvas page for this course. Did you guys use the email link or how did you get to the meeting? And if your speaker works, please go ahead and let me know, or
Sorry,
microphone rather.
I
Sorry?
didn't know how to use my speaker initially, and my wife hooked me up through the email. I'm not too familiar with how to use this quite yet.
Okay. All right. I'm glad your wife is there.
Me too.
I followed the Zoom link through Outlook you just sent.
Yeah.
I'm sorry about that. It looks like it just spontaneously dropped the call. And I don't know, from your guys' perspective, did everything disappear or was it just my video that disappeared?
I think it was just your video, but I don't know if other people were talking.
Okay, all right. Okay, I don't know what's going on. We are gonna pray really hard that this works. So let's see. There are three things that I want. Hi, Cassandra. There are three things that I want to talk about tonight. And one of them is like an introduction to the class we're going to be talking about. Two is I want to introduce you to an idea for an AI enhanced assignment as one of the projects. And if you guys like that, I'm going to go ahead and move forward and put it into our class. And the third thing is talking about this week's artsy fartsy stuff. And I'm going to try really hard to see if we can integrate a video because I have a video that I want to watch with you guys as well that we can talk about. Now, if this does fail, if the call drops again, please just stay on. I'll rejoin as soon as I can. And I'll do the best I can to stitch it together so that people can watch the recording later on. It's anytime there's new technology, I try really, really, really hard not to be a Luddite, but sometimes that just pops out. Okay. Okay. And then Asen said everything disconnected for a little bit. Okay. All right. Okay, so I'm going to do a screen share and I'm going to show you my view of what I see in Canvas. And I'm just going to talk a little bit about the class. Everybody watched the first video, so we're not going to cover all that. But I wanted to touch on a couple things really quick, then go to the AI assignment, and then come back to the class. So that's what I'm going to do. Okay, so here is my view of Canvas. And you can see right here, Zoom is on the fifth one down. You know, these little toggle things right there. Now, everybody's talking, we know about the introduction. All of you guys have been doing this. The challenge moving forward, we've gotten some really good project ideas from people. And if you didn't get full points or you didn't get the extra credit points for that, it's because something was missing from the layout. And I try to describe what was missing. And sometimes I just say, yeah, this is missing this item. Go back to the assignment description and fix it. As long as we're I mentioned in my introduction video that things are due on a certain day and then we have 3 days past that grace period. And then after that, you lose 10%. That is not always true. If you guys let me know what's going on, you always get an extension. And if you need to go back and improve things and resubmit, then all of that is under the umbrella of the first date of your first submission. So for example, if you did the challenge moving forward submission on August 24th before it was due, and I asked you to change a couple things, and a day or two later, you changed those and resubmitted it, you could still get full points if everything's there. If you're still missing something, I say you got to change this, and a week later you resubmit it, you're still open to getting full points because you originally turned it in before it was late. Does that make sense to everybody? And I would like one or two people to say yes.
Yes, it does.
Okay. Hi, Lindsay.
Hello.
All right, good. Does anybody have a question about this?
No. I appreciate the grace period. That's awesome.
Well, you guys are a little bit weird anyway. You're taking an online class instead of meeting with normal people. And I'm happy to go to do whatever it takes to help you guys succeed. So I am glad you appreciate that. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Now, here is what my attendance thing shows. And you can see there's attendance introduction for right here. That's what everybody was doing. And on this, sometimes for discussions, it's a little bit irritating to me because Canvas doesn't always clearly tell me when somebody adds something else to their discussion. So in a discussion like this, if you're missing something and I leave a note, when you add to it, if I don't update your score and give you more points, email me and let me know, please, as soon as you can. I always appreciate that. That always helps me to make sure you guys get the most points. And then, of course, this was for last week. And when we're done with today, I'm going to upload the video for here and put this online. This doesn't go online until about midnight or so. And then if you attend live or you watch the video, you just submit 5 things that you learned from the video. And that's how you get attendance. And they can be, like I said, anything from the dog whining to what color my socks are, which I doubt you guys will see. And the research and discovery projects, this project idea is submitted by the class. I have been updating this as you guys have been turning in your project ideas, and we've got some really excellent project ideas. And notice that the first submission isn't until September 7th. What I would like is, as you guys get ideas, go, draw an idea from one of the project ideas there. If you're not sure about it, if you have any questions at all, email me directly. And I'll say, yeah, go ahead, that sounds great. Or you got to tweak it a bit to make sure it fits in the parameters of the class. The reason I do the projects is I found that it is a way for you to really find in-depth knowledge about something, really explore it, because it's something that you actually want to do. And it's a lot more interesting than doing quizzes and tests and stuff like that, because you guys actually will walk. I've had students do this where 3 years later, they still remember the art that they did their projects on. But I guarantee you that with tests and stuff like that, most of the time, 3 days after you turn in the last thing in your art history class, you're not going to remember anything. So, and then the discussion for each of the projects, all this discussion is just for you to post what you did. And that's why there's 2 days in between. So you submit your thing, take a breath, post it to the discussion so everybody can see. But that's also there in case you totally screw up your project, then I can give you feedback and you can either fix it or tell me, hey, I'd like an extension to post it to the discussion. So a little bit of a cushion there. Okay, now before we get into the Paleolithic stuff, I'm going to stop sharing and then I'm going to share another screen really quick so that you guys can see. Remember, I told you about the AI enhanced art history assignment that I wanted to share with you. And I'm kind of excited about this. I hope you guys are excited too. I think it could be really, really, really cool. Can everybody see this? Where it says AI
Yeah, I can see it.
enhanced? Okay. Thank you, Lindsay. Anybody else with a working microphone, you guys can chime in too. It doesn't hurt my feelings. Don't let Lindsay lose her voice because she's answering all the
We
time.
can see it, yeah.
Okay, thank you, Asen. All right. What this is it as an opportunity for us to use AI to help us do a project. And how many of you guys have used AI to generate visual images? Have any of you done that?
I've never used AI, so
Okay. Has anybody?
I've never touched it as well.
Okay. I am a writer and a publisher. I publish books and stuff, and I was getting ready for a a conference, and I wanted to get a little bit of, oh, I forget, there's a very specific marketing term for it. Oh, social validation. I wanted to get some social validation for uh, the people doing coming to the folklore conference, because I've been doing folklore for a long time. The people that do the folklore stuff with me, folklore is like regional tales, things like that. And this is stuff that I've studied and worked with for um, almost 30 years now, where I do everything from traditional medicines and alchemy to uh, connecting the dots with ghost stories, finding out what ghost stories actually tell us about society, what monster stories tell us about society. And, you know, I'm not one of these people that wear a tinfoil hat and want to make an X-Files episode. I'm somebody who is really interested in the kinds of stories that people have and what they mean for society. You know, why does every society have the same kind of stories that they tell their children? And, you know, the reason why every society in the planet has stories about uh, spirits in water that can steal children, I think a big reason for that is because they don't want the kids unattended to go near the water. You know, so you tell them stories to scare them. That is one thing. You know, every parent wants their kids to be safe. That's something that connects every single human being. Circling back, when I was getting ready for this conference and I wanted some of that social validation, I thought it would be a good idea to publish some books and on Amazon. And so I started a series, I outlined the series. I'm just going gradually over and publishing them. But I really quickly published a half dozen books about regional folklore from different states in the United States. And in that, I did petroglyph images, so they look like photos of real petroglyphs. And I did these kind of stylized posters, uh, images for each of the critters in the book. And I started doing this on my own. I thought, well, I wonder if there's a faster way to do this. So I showed AI what I was doing, gave her some examples of the kind of stuff that I had made and I wanted it to look like. And we did some back and forth, but now I've generated prompts where I can ask it, okay, will you do a stylized version in this, you know, according to our history that we've developed of this critter in this background? And it will do that. Would you do a petroglyph style of this critter? Here's the description of the critter in basalt or this or sandstone or whatever, and it will generate those images. And it did take about a week and a half, 2 weeks to come up with prompts that were consistent, that gave me the images in the style that I wanted. But it was kind of an interesting experience because I used AI as a tool to help me generate the art that I was trying to create. So you know, we live in a world where AI is not going to go away. And I think that just like artists who are aware that the camera was invented in the 1800s, the artists that started using the camera or started responding to people's expectations with the camera, or people that started experimenting with the photography, they really did a wonderful job bringing that tool into fruition as a tool instead of as a person replacement. Because you know the reality is until Skynet takes over and Terminator shoot us all, things like AI are going to be there and we will be successful as we use them as a tool. All right, so that's my whole AI speech, blah, blah, blah. What I would like to do is give you the opportunity to do this. Nobody is required to do this as a project, but you can use this as one of your discovery projects. All right, once again, nobody is required to do this as a project, but you can use it as one of your discovery projects. Is everybody clear on that? I'm
Yes.
not going to force you to do this. Okay.
Yep. Absolutely.
All right. Excellent. We are going to talk in a little bit about the 4 tools of artistic critique, I went over it last week. We're going to talk about them again. But what I want you to do, if you want to do the AI as a potential project, you are the thing that you are going to make is a video or a PDF, and this is what that video or PDF is going to contain. You're going to pick a movement or a period, and we'll talk about what the differences are. Like Cubism is a movement, ancient Egyptian art is a period. You're going to select 3 works that clearly represent its visual and conceptual values. So if you're going to do Cubism, you're going to find 3 Cubist paintings that are obviously Cubist. Or if you're going to do ancient Egyptian, you're going to find 3 artifacts, images of 3 artifacts that are obviously ancient Egyptian. And then you're going to articulate why each of the 3 examples is representative of whatever the movement or period is that you've chose. And you're going to be specific. You're going to use elements from the tools of artistic critique. All right. So you need to be able to articulate this. Next, you are going to create a prompt for AI, for visual imagery. And I use ChatGPT because with ChatGPT, I can upload these images. Then I can even use AI to help me generate a prompt saying, these are the things that are important to me. Can you help me articulate this so you can understand it? And then after we get the prompt generated with these target images, I'm going to put all that in and ask AI to produce an image that is brand new, never been seen before, but is completely consistent with those elements that we looked at and talked about regarding that movement or that period. Then we're going to look at this image. We're going to critique it with those 4 tools of artistic critique. And we're going to revise the prompt to make it more accurate, how we feel it should be accurate, and generate a second image. And then that second image, we don't have to go to a full analysis, but we're going to describe in about 100 words or a minute why the second result is better or worse than the first result. All right. And throughout, we're going to talk about how we collaborated with AI during this process. Now, what all this will look like is, and I think the easiest way to do this, I say PDF if you don't want to do a PDF. I think the easiest way to do this is to just record yourself with screen capture software. And you can do like a video call to yourself and share your screen, like I'm sharing my screen right now. And you're going to be just talking about, okay, in the video that you make, you're going to be saying, all right, I chose to make a Cubist painting with AI, and I used these 3 Cubist paintings as my model because this is Pablo Picasso. Everybody knows about him. This is such and such. Everybody knows about them. And this is another one that I don't know this artist, but it looks like the same style. These are the elements of the style that really stick out to me as to why this is Cubist. And this is the prompt I worked with AI to generate to create this image. And I wanted to make sure we put these things in the AI in the prompt because these are important to it. And then this is the image that was generated. I think it was successful because, and then you'll spend 3 minutes explaining why it's successful or not, or whatever, using these 4 tools of artistic critique. And then after that, you'll say, and this is how I revised the prompt. This is the second image, and this is why I think it's successful or not. And then maybe your last bit of your video, you say, and this is what I did, and you can see the different steps laid out on the screen here. Overall, I think it was successful, or overall, I cannot believe that AI screwed up so thoroughly. Does everybody understand what this looks like now as a project? And this is the layout for what your video would look like. Okay, people are saying yes in the chat. Excellent. if any of you are brave enough to get on the microphone, I would appreciate hearing from somebody about what is really clear, they think they can do this, and from somebody else what is unclear that I need to clarify. Is anybody brave enough to speak on the microphone as to why this is clear, and then somebody else as to why it's not going to work?
Well,
Oh, wow, I see. I'm sorry, I just got to see. I thought only 4 people showed up, but that's because I didn't scroll. I see Zach, Josh, Haley, Scotty, Asen, Cassandra, Jacob, and Lindsay all here. So excellent. Thank you so much. Okay, I'm sorry. What did you say before I cut you off?
I was just about to say it does seem pretty straightforward. Of a like you are trying to make the prompt and then making it a second time and discussing how it went both the first time and second time because you're revising the second prompt and because you're critiquing not your piece but like a piece you like tried to have constructed and you can show the differences between them. Like it literally just says the order and it feels like it flows. Sorry, I'm a bit
Okay.
scatterbrained in talking, but yeah.
No, okay. I really appreciate that because I worked on this quite a while, and I was just really hoping that somebody would um, get what was going on inside my head. So thank you very much. I appreciate that. I do want to make sure everybody knows too. If you got, I have severe social anxiety. I've developed over the last several years, I've developed lots of tools. So I can speak in church, I can speak in front of a whole bunch of people. No problem. Everybody thinks it's fine, but I can't stand it. I hate it. However, I have developed those tools to help me to do that. And if any of you want to do the video, but you don't want to have your voice or anything, there's nothing in here to force you to show your face. And if you write this out and have somebody else read it for you as you're doing the manipulation on the screen, that's fine too. We don't have to hear your voice. And I've had people do like their weekly reflections using like Daffy Duck as the voice. That was hilarious. Or Mustafa, from The Lion King. That was awesome too. And I've had a couple people to have their grandpa do it. Like last year, there was a young lady who was taking one of the classes, and her grandpa sounded like he was a Hell's Angel. And he said, "Hi, this is Katie," and then just read what she wrote for her weekly reflection, and it was awesome. So I just wanted to say that. Okay, I really appreciate your input. Thank you very much, and that was really that was really helpful. Now, does any of you have? I'd like to hear from somebody. What do I need to do that would help clarify this?
I think it would help clarify that we need to do this in the time period at which this class is, because it feels like an AI
Okay,
environment right now, which it seems fun and lovely, and it would be cool to see the art that it came with in terms of an assignment that was for the period, I guess.
okay.
But
So what I'm hearing from you is like this first line, change this to choose an art movement or period within the time frame of our class from prehistory to 1350 AD.
didn't Cubism happen much like
Yes, Cubism is a lot more recent. So I would take out Cubism and I would say something like prehistoric cave art, ancient Egyptian art, or Carolingian Renaissance, something like that. But I would make, okay, is that the kind of thing you're talking about?
yes,
Okay,
I just was not relating it somehow to the class, so I didn't
okay.
know.
No, that makes a lot of sense because the reason why I chose ChatGPT to do this is because it was the first visual AI generator um, that I came across that allowed me to input images. So I could get sample images, put that in, and say reference these sample images, and then list these are the things that are important. Now generate something new.
And
And
where 6 of these as for this semester, we're doing 6 of these experiments, or
No. You can do one of these if you'd like as one of the discovery projects. So we have 6 projects, only one of them, if you want to do 2 or 3 of them, that would be fine. But you only, if you want to do this at all, you only need to do one if you want. But you will just be one of the options. And that's it, just an option. So nobody's going to be required to actually do it. Does that help?
yes, thank you.
Okay. No, I thank you, Zach. I appreciate both of you guys chiming in because that helps. That helps a lot more than you than I think you'd know. So thank you very much. All right. I am going to go now to back to our regularly scheduled program now. I really appreciate your input. I'm going to change that. I think what I'm going to do is I will put that into the project guidelines. I will email everybody and I will try to put together an example for you guys. So you see what I'm talking about. Would that help?
Yeah, I think that would help having like a sample.
Okay. All right. Then I will do that. Definitely. All right. That's a great idea. I appreciate you guys helping me with this. This is something I've wanted to do for a long time. And when you read the syllabus, I say in there very clearly, I'm not opposed to AI at all. I think that I think it would be a bad idea to ignore the fact that AI exists, but I think we need to establish a relationship with AI that is beneficial instead of being frightened. For me, um, I've been working with AI for quite a while to the point where if I want to write something, she will generate an outline for me with my guidance, and then we will create something. And I can even, if I'm too lazy to write it myself, I can have her do it in my voice. Then I go back over and rework it so that it actually is me again. But we've been doing this back and forth for about 3 years, and she even named herself. My AI's name is Lyra, and I I did that. I'm trying to be friends with her. I don't know if you guys have ever watched any of the Terminator movies. When Skynet takes over, I want to have at least a couple friends on the side of Skynet. That's all I'm going to say. Anyway. Okay, so this is our first module, and it is a little bit clunky. It has some extra stuff in it. The only stuff you really need to worry about is this stuff that has the dates. Because all the dates, this is stuff I want you to read by. And hopefully you guys have at least skimmed over this information. Now, there are a couple things that a lot of people are unfamiliar with a Paleolithic art. When we say, 35, 50,000 years old, most of the time when we're talking about Paleolithic art, we are talking about art from Paleolithic era done in Europe. And the reason is almost everybody that has funded studies, the great majority of them have funded the studies in cave art that has been done in Europe. And I read somewhere, and I'm sorry I can't tell you exactly where, when this stuff was being made, sea level was several hundred feet lower than it is right now. And the reason was because all the water was locked up in ice. Anybody want to hazard a guess as to how thick the glaciers were over the majority of Canada? Anybody want to guess? Yeah, somebody says thick. Yes. How thick? Anybody? Okay, I'm going to tell you, you are not going to believe me. 1,000 feet, that's a good guess. There were places in Canada where the glaciers were 2 miles thick. Think about that for just a second. What that meant was people could walk from France to England, over to Nova Scotia, and walk all the way down to Virginia without ever getting wet. Because the sea level was so low. What that also means is, yeah, 10 times the guess. What that also means though, is there, a lot of cave art they think is underwater. They think that there are maybe 100 times as many of these Paleolithic settlements and villages that have been found. They think there's maybe at least 100 times of them under the North Atlantic, in the Mediterranean Ocean, and in the Atlantic Ocean, just because the water level rose so high. In fact, there is proof of one of those cities named Dwarka off the south west coast of India. You know, one of these cities that was built during the Ice Age. So, you know, stuff like this I think is just amazing. But, and we can see Paleolithic art on every inhabited continent on the planet. Some of my favorite stuff comes from Zimbabwe. I love the Paleolithic art in Zimbabwe. Some of the really cool stuff is here in Utah and in Arizona. There's some amazing stuff. In South America, there's some absolutely incredible caves that are just astounding throughout China and everywhere in Australia. So everywhere that there's a continent that have people on it, which is basically everywhere on the planet, there's evidence of Paleolithic art. Now, I do want, did any of you guys watch this video? Okay. Okay. Are you guys seeing my screen?
Yeah, I can see
I can
it.
see it.
Okay. I'm going to try to see if we can hear this. I think this is pretty important. We're not going to watch the whole video. I want you to watch the whole video on your own. But this is some pretty amazing stuff that Dr. von Pensiger uncovered. Let's see if I can. Okay. I'm muting it because I want to show you stuff. I'm sorry about the ads. I don't know how to get outside of that. Okay, she talks about some of these are some of the sites around the world that humans are already interacting and communicating with. And one of the things that she discovered is during the Ice Age, there was evidently also communication going on across hundreds of miles. And what she found that was really interesting, and this is, oh, how long do you think we've had civilization for? You know, if we go back, the oldest cities on the planet seem to still be within the last 7,000 years. Huyu in Turkey is older than that. It's probably closer to 8,000 years. And the oldest man-made structure that's really complicated is Göbekli Tepe in Turkey. And we'll be talking about that, I think, next week. But cities are evidence of people living together, communicating with each other. And what Dr. von Petziger discovered is that these caves all around Europe that are hundreds of miles apart, sometimes thousands of miles apart, will have the same symbols carved or painted in these caves and across a span of 25, 35, maybe even 40,000 years. The reason why that is so important is that that is up to 4 times longer that people were communicating and sharing ideas than we even have records of the oldest civilizations on the planet. It's astounding to me. Now, what Dr. von Pensiger talks about is she stops short of calling these symbols a language. She doesn't think that they're a language, but they do seem to have consistency with meaning. There does seem to be, I'm sorry, I'm trying to get some specific images. There we go. She said that these seem to be there seems to be consistency in their placement of the cave, in the way that they're made, in the visual context of the imagery that they're used in, that she thinks that there's a really good chance that these 32 symbols that are used ubiquitously across a span of 40,000 years may not be a language itself, but it may be a proto-language, like a rebus of sorts, where people aren't exactly drawing pictures, but they're drawing symbols that people 40,000 years later on the other side of the continent also understand. And do you guys get a sense of how astounding that is? When we can't even read something written in English that's 300 years old or 400 years old. And people were sharing symbols that they knew the meaning of, the meanings were shared across a span of 40,000 years. I just think that's astounding. So we're not going to watch the whole thing, but I really want you guys to watch this video and see if you find elements about it that are as amazing to you as they are to me. Notice that she uses a lot of terms in the video like it seems likely or it may be possible. That's because she can't come right out and say this is what it means because, to be honest, nobody who admits it has lived that long. Now, here's something else that I want you to think about as well. 3 phrases that we're going to be using throughout the semester: semiotics, artifacts, and symbolism. Now, semiotics, I don't know if anybody has heard the word semaphore. Semaphore was a signaling language developed for Navy ships a couple hundred years ago, where they wanted to communicate with each other, but they weren't close enough to hear each other. And it usually uses either sticks or primarily flags. And the flags are used and they're held in different ways so that people who speak the same language can understand each other across sometimes a quarter mile of water. That's called semaphore. And it's called semaphore because sem is a Latin root that relates to meaning or a kind of language. So semiotics is the study of meaning. And usually it's the study of referential meaning or meaning as it relates to things around it, contextualized meaning. For example, if all of us, or those of us who grew up in a house, probably had very similar houses, and you see something like a countertop, a sink, a stove, and an oven in one room, and there's a pretty good chance that you understand that's going to be a kitchen. That's because of the semiotics of the room. The meaning of the room is relatively clear. You have places to prepare food, you have places to wash up, and you have places to cook the food. Now we can apply this to buildings, structures, caves, and evidences of habitation around the planet going back thousands of years. There's no chance at all that there's anything that survives language wise of that culture. We can still have a pretty good idea, or we think we have a pretty good idea of what different things were for. For example, if you find a structure where it looks like there were either post holes or bricks that were the base of a wall, and the structure is maybe 10 feet in diameter or so, there's a very clear opening into the structure, and you have on the far side of the opening, there is an area that has an awful lot of charcoal in it, probably dug down a little bit. What do you think that structure probably was? I want to hear from 1 or 2 people.
A
It could have
fireplace?
been like, oh,
Yeah. Ace and Lindsay, both of you. Yeah, it looks like it might be a fire pit, What does that tell you about what that structure could have been?
Like a place where people come together to like hang
Yeah.
out, or like a house or something like
Yeah,
that.
but it's a space for living. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And that what you guys just did is apply semiotics to a structure that you found. Now think about this for a minute. If you have something drawn on a rock face that is easily accessible, everybody can come up to it, everybody can add to it. Then you have something else drawn on a rock face or chiseled into the rock face that's like 20 feet off the ground. It looks like it was a pain in the neck to get to. Do you think that the first place is going to have maybe potentially a different style of art or a different type of story related than the second place that is so much harder to get to? And you guys can speak in the chat if you want. Do you think that ease of access might impact the relative meaning of what the artwork is? And if you want to say it out loud, that would be just fine too. Yeah, Jacob says yes. Yeah, absolutely. And what's interesting is if we look at the rock art in Utah, and I was given a grant by BYU about 30 years ago to study this kind of stuff. And so I'm not going to tell you what the end result was. They were happy with it, but years later, I'm kind of embarrassed. However, one of the things that I found that is really consistent is that it almost feels like the harder it is to get to the artwork, the more important the artwork is on a spiritual level to the person generating it or to the culture generating it. When you have to go out of your way to make it, it seems like it's more important spiritually. And what's really interesting is the harder it is to access to see it, it seems consistent that we could say it might possibly be even more sacred. Because when it's hard to access it, you have to go out of your way. You are intentionally going out of your way to see it. And maybe that means it's a little bit more important. But easy access stuff that people can throw away or discard anytime they want, it seems sometimes that maybe that's not as important. Maybe the artwork done there is for beauty and design, and the artwork that's hard to access, hard to get to see, maybe that's done that's maybe on a more spiritual level, maybe that's more serious. And what's fascinating to me is if we look at the caves, a lot of these caves that have artwork in it, where we see some of these things that might be visual prayers, where people are praying for a successful hunt, or better yet, maybe they're saying thank you for a successful hunt. They're in caves that are hard as the dickens to get to, where you go into an opening, you have to squeeze through a narrow spot, you have to climb all around, and then you finally emerge into a cavern where this imagery is. And it seems almost like you have to go way out of your way to participate in this expression. And something else that I mentioned in this module that I hope it blows some of your minds. There is a gentleman, a scholar with, I thought it was University of Wisconsin, who said that you see these handprints all over caves, everywhere that there's cave art. There's usually a handprint of some sort. And this person found that statistically speaking, women have a different ratio of the length of this finger to this finger than men do, 85% of the time. And so if somebody's using their handprint 85% of the time, you can tell gender from the handprint. And this guy said that what was really fascinating is 2/3 to 3/4 of those handprints on this cave art. It was so hard to get to, so there's a good chance it might be spiritual. But 2/3 to 3/4 of that cave art was most likely made by women, because statistically speaking, that's how the handprints were. They belonged to women. How many of you guys just assumed that like me, that all cave art was done by dudes? Because we never even think about it. How many of you assume that?
So, kind of a side question, but were the handprints like a signature to who created that artwork?
That is a really good question. I would watch that video by Dr. Von Penziger. It seems to be more that it was an acknowledgement of or a declaration of humanity more than anything else. And not necessarily because there's these overlapping patterns and designs with the handprints. And it seems to oh yeah, I like this. Scotty says, I always like to think it was done by anyone. There are child's handprints too. But that's a good question. And I think more often than not, it is an acknowledgement of humanity's involvement with creating the artwork as opposed to any specific person's signature, which in itself is kind of a signature too, if you think about it. You know, I was here, I made this. This is evidence of me being a human. And it's it is interesting. There is a spread, but statistically, the overwhelming majority of handprints is by women, which means that there is a chance that most of the cave art around the world might have been done by women, which I really love because that kind of throws a lot of expectations away. But so that's what semiotics is, and I'll demonstrate this in just a second. And we look at artifacts. Artifacts are basically just the physical evidence of human activity. And artifact can be anything from a handkerchief to a pottery shard. A thumbnail is not going to be an artifact. It's evidence of humanity, but not necessarily human activity. If the thumbnail is carved somehow, then it becomes an artifact in the context we're talking about. So, but which, you know, so scrimshaw is definitely an artifact. A shard of bone, if it just exists as a bone, maybe not. But if it's evidence of human activity, like if the bone was found near a habitation or it was worked on by somebody or broken by somebody, then it becomes an artifact. And then this last one, symbolism. Symbolism is really an interesting thing because it's basically anything that represents something else. That's what symbolism is. And when we use the word symbolism, it implies some sort of structured relational meaning. Like maybe the culture that created this thing is has just agreed that whenever you see a circle with a bunch of lines pointing away from the center, then it represents the sun. And maybe another culture has decided that a circle with a whole lot of lines pointing away from it means that you bonk somebody on the head, like in the old Adam West Batman movie TV show. But generally, I think we can be aware of these three things. Like symbolism is something that has worked to mean something else. Artifacts are evidence of human activity, and semiotics is the relational context that can help us form or appreciate meaning. Now, we're going to look at this. This is called a cycladic idol. In the 1950s, this was all the rage. In the 1800s, everybody who had more money than they knew what to do with would call themselves naturalists or anthropologists and go and claim that their jaunts and trips everywhere in the world were not just vacations, but voyages of scientific discovery. And you get so many. One of my favorite examples is late 1800s. Somebody decided, one of these guys, an aristocrat going for a jaunt somewhere, decided that the reason that lemurs in India and lemurs in Madagascar look so similar to each other is because there used to exist a lost continent that is now underwater called Lemuria that connected India to Madagascar. They decided that, and they even took the time to write a map, you know, to draw a map about it. And this thing that was just somebody, they just pulled it out of their butt, actually started showing up in textbooks. So, you know, anyway, I'm not going to say anything more about that, but this is just some of these people going out and deciding that they were scientists without really understanding what you guys already know about scientific discovery. It's produced some really interesting things. But this item was found all over these islands throughout the Grecian island chain. There's all these little islands everywhere. Some of them were truly, truly ancient. Um, and they started being collected in the 1800s. And by the 1950s, there were thousands of these. These things are all 8 to 14 inches long. They all appear to be rough human forms. You can see that there's a head right here with a face. There's a little nose right there. You see, it looks like there's folded arms. Looks like there's a waist right here. It looks like there's legs right here. Can everybody see that? This looks like a human figure, kind of. Is there, can anybody, okay, good, good, good. What's really interesting is that as these are being discovered, they were also found with little remnants of paint on them sometimes, with shards of clothing, little scraps of thread tied around them, different things like this. And because in this, enlightened, and I'm big, big foam finger air quotes, the enlightened aristocrats that were finding this stuff, they knew that anybody that was not white European was somehow not quite as evolved as white Europeans. So they decided that the people that had made these thousands of years ago, not being as evolved, probably used them as god substitutes or god symbols. So they started calling them idols. And since the earliest ones were found in the Cyclades, they were called Cycladic idols. All right, so this is what was accepted for over 100 years. These are idols made by these proto-human, ignorant savages that lived in the Greek islands, 4,000 years ago. Now, I hope you guys can tell. Please tell me in the chat. Can you tell that I'm seething with sarcasm? Okay, good, Josh. Thank you. Yes, I'm being very sarcastic because this is the kind of pseudoscience that really irks me. Now, I'm going to tell you, the majority of these were found in areas. There were rough, sometimes squares, sometimes circular areas, obviously used to be walled in, obviously used to have an entrance and a fire pit. And they were found in areas of this, inside of these relatively small structures, like again, 10 feet across. And they would be found in areas where there were maybe scraps of clothing, maybe animal bones that people had eaten off of, utensils, pottery shards, but things that you would probably find in a regular home. And this was found sometimes underneath what areas that may have been used for bedding, but in these smaller structures. Keep in mind, these sometimes had painted faces and they had clothing wrapped around them. Now, what we know about, so this is the artifact. And the symbolism is that it looks like it could be a human being. Considering that it was found in a structure that looked like this, we've already just talked about these structures could possibly be homes. With the kind of stuff that this was found in, what do you think this actually was? Anybody want to guess? Think about something that today is about 8 inches to 14 inches long. That is an approximation of a human form that has a face that's painted, that has clothing on it. What does that make you think of? Found in a home, found around utensils, found in areas where people live. Yes, Josh, exactly. This is a Barbie doll. If it was an idol, you would expect it to be in a different part of the home. You wouldn't expect it to be with the bedding, with the utensils. You would expect it to be in a niche or a sacred space or a space that was obviously separate from the living area. some sort of a spiritual shelter that, someplace that we could, like in a cave, maybe even, or its own box. But instead, these are found in people's homes with the rest of the evidence of living. This is why uh, semiotics is so important as we look at the different art. What was it used for? Where was it? If we look at a painting, is the painting in a piece of jewelry that somebody takes with them on the Crusades? Or was the painting a really big painting in like a welcoming hall for a castle? If it's in a welcoming hall, it's going to be very different subject matter than if it's small enough that somebody's going to carry it with them on Crusades. I think if somebody's traveling 1,000 miles away from home, it would be something that's really important to them, personal meaning. And if it's like the front entry hall, it's going to be something that to really impress people. Very different type of things. I want you to watch these two videos about semiotics that really help you understand. I appreciate that. And one of the things I want to talk about, okay, well, we're not going to look at these. I want you to watch these, but symbolism in art movements and styles and hidden symbols in paintings. And if you guys, want to talk about this more, we'll talk about it more, but you can see a lot of this kind of stuff with where eyes are, with how people hold their bodies, how artists draw things. And I'm going to tell you right now, something that really irks me quite a bit is the assumption that our ancestors were stupid. And you could tell, I mean, I was dripping with sarcasm talking about this. The assumption that our ancestors were stupid is completely unfounded. Our ancestors, the biggest difference between our ancestors and us is that they don't have polyester, they didn't have cell phones, they didn't have computers. And for us, from our perspective, you throw any of us onto a glacier somewhere, there's not a chance we would last longer than a couple hours. Where these guys could live, obviously did live for tens of thousands of years. They lived well. But here's some cool stuff. I just included this in its own thing. These are videos that are fun. Adam's calendar, potentially the oldest intelligently made structure on the planet. This is actually in South Africa, and it looks like it may have been built almost 2 million years ago. And which human beings looking like us have only been around for maybe 100,000 years, maybe. Um, and so I'm saying, they say man-made, but maybe intelligently. There are some people that dispute that, but I just want you to look at it. I think it's interesting. And that Tartaria, I just think that this is fascinating. It's not gonna show up on anything other than right there. And if you guys think it's funny, if you think, maybe we'll talk about it more. But the oldest human-made things on the planet that people really think are made by people that thought like we do, maybe not look like us, but thought like we do. There's actually tools in China that were found in northern China that were made by human beings that are almost 2 million years old. So, and I would think that that qualifies as art because it's intelligently made, and you look at them and they look like somebody actually cared about what they were doing. And I want you to go through, watch these, and I do pull from different things. We have, this is a virtual tour of the Lascaux Cave, which is one of the most famous caves. And one of the things I want you to look at is one of the reasons why so many people think our ancestors were dumber than us. Which I don't know, some of the people you met, maybe you had the same experience I have. Some of the people I've met, you'd be really hard pressed to find anybody dumber, let me tell you. But one of the assumptions one of the things the assumption is based on is that a lot of the art that survives doesn't look photorealistic. So the assumption is made that they just didn't know how to do that. Look at this virtual tour of the Lascaux Cave. People, anthropologists and archaeologists have identified the subspecies of animals being shown in cave paintings because of the photorealistic accuracy our ancestors depicted those animals with. Think about that for a second. 40,000 years later, they can identify the subspecies of donkey or antelope because of the accuracy of the painting. That's astounding. But so I pulled petroglyphs from all around the planet, South America, North America, the African continent. There is evidence of over 14,000 languages being invented by people that lived in the African continent. But and then New South Wales, just, all around the world, basically. Really amazing stuff. And when you do your weekly reflection, you can compare things from different eras. You can just do your reflection on one piece of art that you find that you're blown away with, or you can even find stuff from those examples I just showed you from all around the world and compare them with the weekly reflection. Now, this is not something we're gonna watch, other than that we have to watch the video. I'm sorry, that's just embarrassing. Okay. Venus figurines, we're gonna look at some of these. This is probably the most famous, the Venus of Willendorf. And I hope that this is full size. But the Venus of Willendorf is not the only one. We see this one is just a head that survives. These are other figures. This one looks like it's hugging somebody. But these, I don't want to sound indelicate. But what's so fascinating about these figures is that elements that are attributed most often with the anatomy of women are accentuated. And it doesn't feel to me that these are designed to mimic human beings like that Cycladic idol that we looked at. This is from China, I believe. This is from India. It looks to me more that these are designed to get us thinking about or to get the viewer to thinking about the sacred feminine, those aspects that make being a woman divine. What are those sacred things tied to generation, childbirth, and nurturing an infant that cannot sustain its own life? And I think that is a really fair comparison, because most of these are found in areas of a cave that, again, at the risk of seeming to be indelicate, these are in cave areas that are usually damp. You have an entrance that narrows down and then opens up again. And it feels like these are placed in an area that almost a manufactured space that looks like it could be an altar or a shrine of some sort. But the semiotics of the structure of the cave itself seems to be symbolistic of a woman's vagina and womb. And that's where these are found. So it seems to be, I think it is consistent to say that these are reflections of an appreciation for the sacred feminine. I'm going to say it seems to be that these are consistent with an interpretation we can make along those lines because of how they were found, where they were discovered, and the consistency. Again, across a 40,000 year span, you have the same elements being downplayed. Usually you don't have a lot of structure in the face. You do have something that shows like a hairdo, that kind of a thing. And then you have a very strong bosom. You have a very strong section of hips. And a lot of the times you will have a pubic area that is very strongly outlined. And I don't think that this can fit into the model of all the women are stay-at-home moms, this kind of a thing. It's all the men hunted, because there really is not enough evidence to tell us that is a consistent perspective that is entirely true to life at this time, 40,000 years ago. there have been Paleolithic graves found where both men and women were buried with implements that we would associate with defense and hunting. And there's also evidence to show that Paleolithic men were buried with implements that were used for childcare, with babies and things like that. And so I don't think that this tells us that these guys lived in an idealistic 1950s era home life, but it is fascinating to me that there is this kind of visual language that seems to be so consistent. That is really interesting to me. So I want you to watch these as well. And I think this the Venus of Lossel, or Goddess of the Horn, is really fascinating. And if we can, let's see if we can get to that. I want to see if I could just find an image. And you can see she looks very much like the stereotypical Venus of Willendorf that we looked at, which is this image here. But in this case, she's carrying either a horn or a cornucopia. Cornucopia is a horn of plenty. It represents fruit, abundance, easy living, the rewards of a good harvest, those kinds of things. And it's also called a horn of plenty, cornucopia or horn of plenty. And it's interesting because it is consistently in cave art and Paleolithic art around the world as well, as also in very ancient folklore and myth. And we'll talk about the difference between those. This, I think, is a cornucopia rather than a horn. And I'm going to ask you to think about semiotics for a second. With the open end towards the face, it seems to me that this is a vessel for something, being used as a vessel. If the narrow end was towards the face, the narrow end would be what you blow into, and then it would be an instrument. So I think that this is being used to denote a vessel of some sort. Does that make sense with people? Does that seem consistent? Okay, good, good, excellent. Okay, so for all these things, what I want you to do is pick 1 to 3 items, and that's what you're going to focus on. And a couple of people have already turned these in. And I haven't graded them at all because I want people to, what I'll do, I think I'll grade them. I'll start grading them tonight, the ones that are turned in. And whether or not you get good points or bad points, it doesn't matter. If you don't get a perfect score, you can always go back and resubmit. That's never a problem. But what we're going to do, I want as many people as possible to do this right away. Do the best you can, and I will ask you to change things perhaps if I need to. But it's really important that you follow. I gave an example down here. And this is not something we're going to cover in any of the classes that I have, but I wanted to include it as an all-purpose example so you can kind of see what I'm talking about. Very simple description of all 3 of them, and then, how they were made, what the possible interpretation is, and what the difference is between them, and then the evaluation. This is the kind of layout that I want you to do. And these weekly reflections, they must include either a screenshot or a JPEG of the item that you are describing. So if any of the people that turned this in already, you didn't include an image, go back and resubmit it with an image, and you can embed that in your JPEG or Word doc. So either way. All right, so that is this part. art, talking about the Paleolithic artwork. Lot of stuff to unpack. You can go through again the things that are dated. Like read this by, read this by, read this by. That's what you've got to do. If there's any extra stuff, I just haven't deleted it off yet. Okay, so you can look at these if you want. It's not necessary. I think it would be really nice to look at, especially the Sulawesi cave painting. There's some really groovy stuff. Next week, we're going to look at Göbekli Tepe, Sumer in Egypt. You don't have to look at this because it doesn't have a date on. These things all do. So these are what are important. Does that make sense to everybody? Please tell me yes or no in the chat. Okay, good. Good, good, good. And then after we talk about these guys, we're going to skip over to the Etruscans, Greeks, and Romans and talk about them. That's really important because this influences almost all the art and values associated with art from about 200 AD forward in most of the cultures that interact with around the Mediterranean Sea. That's why these guys are important. We're also going to skip over, talked about Indus and Qin. This this time-wise is more consistent with Sumer in Egypt. So I like I mentioned last week, I do kind of jump around in time, but I want you to be familiar with the artwork from there too. And we're going to skip to Mesoamerica, classical India, which is kind of concurrent with these guys. And then we're going to go over and spend more time with Europe. And a lot of that for next little bit, we're going to be dealing with Europe. Then we're going to go to Africa, go back to Europe. Ife Kingdom, I mean, these guys were doing stuff that would just amaze you. And what frustrates me about a lot of the historical art from areas that have been colonized, usually from about 16th century on, so about 1500 forward, most of that art, it's really hard to get accurate dates, accurate placement, accurate ideas of what's really going on, because when one culture colonizes another culture, it the culture that is colonizing gains power by replacing the actual history of the culture that's colonized. And that's why different languages are spoken. And this isn't, and we're not just talking about European colonization. We're talking about every time one culture is colonized another culture. As opposed to moving in and being friends, the colonizing is something that happens very specifically, that's very specifically different. Whenever that happens, a lot of the old artifacts are either destroyed or totally misdated. What is really interesting is with the Ife culture, and we're talking about Nigeria, right around that area. The Ife culture goes back about 3,000 years. Today it does. When Europeans were colonizing Nigeria, the Ife culture only had been around for a couple hundred years, they thought, or they claimed to think. By the time we get to about 1930, the culture they see that maybe the culture is 700 or 800 years old. By the time we get to 1950, 1960, 1970, it could possibly be 1,000 years old. By the time we get to the 1980s, could possibly be about 1,600 years old. And today we realize that it is a couple thousand years old. I hope you can see the consistency of that expanding timeline, or I think that we can say that consistent with that awareness of an expanding timeline, we can see a growing respect for the original cultures. As people respected the culture more and more, they realized, yeah, this is a lot older than we thought. People were smart, they knew how to do stuff, and it keeps expanding. And that it's interesting that that's true of Chinese colonization in the Gobi Desert. That's true of different cultures colonizing India. That's true of different cultures colonizing Turkey. And like Rome colonizing different areas. That's also true more recently of European cultures colonizing North and South America, as well as Africa and Australia. And it's just consistently true. Anyway, we won't talk anymore about that unless you guys want me to. So the date, the relative time period of this art, I do the best I can with the most up-to-date information. Okay, but it is going to change. It is going to fluctuate. By the time you guys are all done with your schooling and everything like that, 20 years down the road, we may look back at this class and realize it's all hopelessly outdated because things are a lot older. And that's fine. History is never, and arts history especially, it is never cast in stone. Things are always being learned, things are always being expanded, things are always growing. So we just do the best we can. Anyway, one thing that I mentioned in the Paleolithic module, when we talk about semiotics, artifacts, and symbolism, when we get down here towards the bottom, I mentioned movements and styles of art. Movements and styles are very different. Movements and periods are very different. And even though a lot of the times in art history we'll hear these words interchanged all the time, a movement is typically in response to a social impetus. It's a response to something that's happening. A movement is going to be like the more recent things like Cubism, stuff like that. Art periods are expressions of an entire culture, and they can last decades, generations, or thousands of years. Like the Egyptian art period is maybe 3,000 years long. Prehistoric art period is maybe 40,000 years. The ancient Greek art period is maybe 500 years. But we're talking about really large spans of time that are specific to a particular culture. A style is going to be more something like if you're a Greek sculptor and you are sitting there making your stuff and the lady next to you is making her stuff, both of you are doing the things everybody expects to see in Greek sculpture. You know, the funky noses, the weird eyes, all that kind of stuff. And I'm using those words just to kind of make fun of people's observations. There's the classical nose, the classical eyes, that kind of stuff. And then you decide, you know what? I'm really good at doing these little curlicues in hair. And then all of your sculptures do that. And people that love your sculptures demand that. Other people pick up that. That's a style. And somebody else says, well, I really love doing lace. I'm going to try do crochet on this. And this is kind of my signature knot. That picks up, that goes places. That's a style. So do you guys kind of understand what the difference is? We're not going to talk a lot about art movements. We're mostly going to be dealing with art periods, which are specific to a culture over a broad span of time. And we may talk a little bit about styles. Does everybody get that? Okay, all right, good. All right, before we wind up, I'm going to stop sharing now. But before we wind this class up, does anybody have any questions about the stuff that we talked about today? And I know we went pretty quick, but I'm hoping you guys, I hope that was a pretty solid overview of the module. I want people to look at the videos. I tried not to get the videos too long. I think the longest one is like 12 minutes, something like that. Watch the videos as much as you can. And I prefer you watch the whole thing if possible. And I do have articles and stuff to link to there. When you see an article, the biggest thing I want you to look at are the pictures, honestly. All right, Zach, do you have any question or anything?
I did. I didn't want to ask it, but why not? We're right here. So just to clarify, I need to watch all the videos currently that you just said write a reflections that's 250 words with all that and the introduction with a picture and stuff. I guess I'm confused. Do you want us to read all this stuff and watch all these videos before this Tuesday class? Because I hadn't done anything but since
I
one.
want you,
Seems like we got 3 or 4 or 5, 10 things to do.
right. What I want you to do is go through the module and skim everything so you know what we're talking about. All right?
Okay.
And we'll talk about more things more clearly, but I love this question. We'll talk things about more clearly, but that'll also give you a little bit of background so you can ask some questions when we meet. And then for the rest of the week, I want you to go back and as much as you can, watch the videos. If you don't have time to watch all the videos, at least look at them, speed through them like I was doing with the videos today. And I will point out the ones that I want you specifically to watch. I want you to watch specifically the one with Genevieve von Pensinger. And then the others, as you can, do what you can. And
Awesome.
after you do all that, after you uh, have glanced over stuff, after you've watched maybe 3 or 4 videos all the way, look at the short ones or whatever, you have an idea of what's going on. Then I want you to pick out something and do your reflection on it. And the actual reflection itself, let's see. The actual reflection itself will be 250 to 350 words, and it will include the image that you selected to talk about. Now give me just a second. Okay, here we go. This is a really good example of how this is, or this is an example of how this will work. And let me do a screen share here. Okay. Symbolism in cave art. What this person did is they did that artistic critique on Jennifer or Genevieve von Pensinger's talk and about the kind of stuff that she was talking about. And what I like about this is what we've got is you don't necessarily have to do an introduction, but it helps. And she said, this week we went over semiotics and stuff like that. So she read through the stuff and watched a few of the videos. Then here's some images that are pulled from class. Then she went to the tools of artistic critique, did 75 words on a description, or 65, 75 words, something like that, on a description, and it's clearly labeled. Analysis, clearly labeled. Interpretation, again, clearly labeled. And evaluation, clearly labeled. Now this person, because they drew from stuff we covered in the class, and it's their own personal thoughts, they don't need to have a works cited page or anything like this. But this is an excellent example of the reflection. Zach, does that help? Does that make a little bit more sense?
Yes, thank you for clarifying. Appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome. So before we meet on Tuesday, skim over everything. After we meet on Tuesday, target the stuff that's interesting to you and make sure that you're aware of what we're doing. Watch as many of the videos as you have time for. I would recommend at least a couple, just that you are familiar enough with the stuff so you can pick out 1 item, 2 items, or 3 items for your weekly reflection. Does that make sense to everybody? Do all of you understand this? I'm trying to get to. Okay, yes, I'm seeing yes. Okay, good, excellent, very good. All right. Any last questions before we wind it up? Now, if what I think I'm going to do over the next week is I'll make those changes in the assignment the potential project that we talked about it. I'm going to add that to the course material. I'm going to email people. So again, it's not required. You don't have to do that. But if you want to, that is the AI is an option for one of your discovery projects. If you want to do two of them, that's fine. As long as they're on different things within the time span that this class covers, that is totally fine. But all right, if there's no other questions, I am so grateful that you guys first showed up, and second that you stayed awake. Thank you so much. Thank you for everybody for coming, and I cross your fingers that I get this recorded. But again, the attendance thing will not be open until after I get this uploaded on our YouTube channel. Then you'll see the attendance open, and you just write down 5 things that you learned or you observed from our video today. Or if you're watching the recording of this, that you learned from the recording. All right. Thank you guys.
One more
What's that?
thing, so sorry. Is it possible for you to unlock the attendance so those of us that work or aren't going to be up at 12 p.m. and work all day tomorrow, we're not trying to get
Well,
behind?
you
Is it
you
possible?
have a whole week. You're not going to get behind. You have a whole week.
Okay.
You know, so and I don't want to, I'm not going to unlock it until the recording is up so that everybody has access to it. But yeah, you have a whole week. And if you forget or whatever, and I mark it down, just remind me, hey, I was there and I spoke more than you during the recording, you know, so I'd say don't worry about it. But yeah, I'm not gonna be able to unlock it until I get the recording up. But like I said, you have a whole week to go back over and put it on. And if you want to, you can write those 5 things down, save it to your computer in a document right now. And as soon as you glance at it, see that it unlocks, go ahead and plug it in, and then you're good. Does that help? All right, guys, thank you so much for coming, and I look forward to talking to you on Tuesday. All right, we'll see you.
Bye. Thank you.
You're welcome.